Okay, welcome to the live session for today. I'm going to be working on a background. I have a commission from someone who has asked me to draw a background for a book that she's writing. And sorry, this is just the background area of the image that I'm going to be working on. And so I need a misty fantasy type background. And so that's what I'm going to be working on today. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you can hear me. So let me make sure that my mic is turned on. I need my glasses. I can't see the microphone without my glasses. Okay, I think I'm turned on. I think my microphone should work. If anybody comes on and says hello, then I'll be able to check it. So again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out just a fantasy kind of land with mountains and just a background that looks like there's mountains off in the background and a real dark sky and that kind of stuff. So at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm going to be drawing on my computer. And so you'll see the way this is done. And I'm drawing with my mouse. So this isn't anything really complex or anything like that. It's just very simple. I'm using a program called Corel Photo Paint, as you can see in the top. And I'm going to start by filling in a space here, or just sort of a real dark sky. So I'm using the paintbrush and a real dark area, kind of like in, I think they call it a vignette, background and foreground. And then I'm going to soften all of that up by coming in with my smudge tool. And I'm going to soften this by just pulling it down a little bit. And you can see how that just sort of softens that sharper edge that I had put in there. And then I'm going to create a landscape in that oval area. We'll see how this actually turns out when we get there. So you can see the way that I've just taken the image, and I'm just zooming in just to make things a little bit easier. And I'm going to be working with a 100. Now at first this is going to look like what the heck am I doing here? And what I'm doing is I'm just applying some gray in order to create an interesting kind of foreground. And just applying an abundance of color, or an abundance of, not really color, I guess, an abundance of grays and blacks in order to achieve this mountain effect I want here. So it's going to be a fairly simple one with a fair amount of distance and then a lot of I'm going to create a mist over top of this in order to, or a fog over top of this, simply because the storyline has that mystery type thing attached to it. So I'm hoping that that's what I'll be able to do. So I don't like that, so I'm going to move it up to probably the 50 here. Now again, you can see how this is just my mouse and using a drawing program called Corel Draw. And what it does when you use these layers together like this, it's fairly easy to achieve. So by pulling this stuff around, you're able to create clouds because you already have the dark area. So now all I'm doing is I'm pulling some of the white up into it. And you can see that that's very slow, so I'm just going to speed it up by changing my nib size to something that will allow me to quickly and very effectively spread the clouds around in order to see the little the way you have it looks like a stutter. That's because the machine that I'm using is getting old now and doesn't have the ability to keep up with some of this massive drawing that I'm pulling everything together in order to create this image. But it does right away help create a feeling in the image that is almost by mistake. I don't know if that's probably not the right word, but it sort of takes away the use of a pencil that most people would use, like when they're drawing, they use a pencil or they use a paintbrush or something like this. And this, because you're using the mouse, gives you a little bit of a looser feeling to your drawing a lot of times, and without so much detail, which in the end gives your background a different feel than it would if, like, the person that will be in here, I'm going to spend like probably 8 times the amount of time that I spend on the background in order to create it. And then what it does is it gives it a totally different feel than the background. But the background will work simply because I'm going to pull it all together to make it work. So now, if I back this up, do you see as you get it smaller, do you see how I'm trying to create the grayish, bluish skyline with the mountains in the background? So if you say, let's squint at it, you'll see it, which is probably very true. So sorry about not talking, but I'm just sort of working to put some color into the clouds. And at the same time, because I've never had the opportunity to work on this, and because I'm drawing live, I get a chance to look and see what people are doing. So pop by, ask your questions. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, you can ask your questions and I'll answer them the best I can. I'll just talk my way through the answers and help you out. If you have a suggestion on what you're looking at or you have a comment, feel free to throw it on there and I'll help you out. And if nobody comes by, then you can access this drawing later on by going on to YouTube or Facebook. I'm using a program to stream on both of them at the same time. It's called Restream, and it streams to about 5 different online social media tools. And so I'm just monitoring now the YouTube and Facebook channel. And we'll do the other channels on another day sometime. So now what I've done is I've sort of smeared around the colors a little bit, as you can see. And now I'm using a softer tool, which is a softer smudge, in order to soften up these clouds. And so I smeared all the color around, and then it's like working in oil or whatever. And now what I'm doing is I'm just softening the stutter lines and some of the bold lines that came flying off the page when I started to pull this stuff around. But you can see how it starts to soften up the sky, and you end up with some clouds. And so down here, I'm going to do the same thing, because here in the foreground, this is like a little lake type thing. It will be part of the background. And again, all I'm trying to do is soften it up, and then I'll zoom into different areas and then create the actual page by the time I'm done. And so when you talk about thirds, you can see how a third is the middle of the page and then a third is the bottom. So this is the law of thirds when it comes to drawing, where you draw a section of it and then you work on the next section and you work on the next section and so on. So um, that's basically all I'm doing at the moment, is just working to try and create this mystical picture. So this is the first layer, and so what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to duplicate that layer so it becomes its own object. And then black out the background. So now the question remains, how do I make this look like a mountain? So I'm going to use the same smudge tool. That's this one. And I'm going to make it a lot smaller, but with a lot more power. So now I can pull the different colors to create a real ragged edge. So I'm just going to keep drawing in the stuff to give you the feeling. And I'm not even sure if anybody can hear this, but I'll just continue to chatter. So this gray area, these gray ones that I'm putting in the background, one of the things that I tell my students a lot is that the farther away you get, the less distinct things become. And so what I'm creating here is some mountains behind some mountains. This almost looks like the top of a sandy type hill. And I don't want that, but we'll fix it as we go along here. And so I normally, when I'm doing these streaming casts, I normally spend about 2 hours working on them. This can be drawn just as easily on an iPad with your pencil using the same basic techniques where you put the color on and then you smudge it in order to create this nice strong background effect of hills and the mist and then the fog. And you can see how I just keep building the layers up. And Bob Ross would turn these into little birds, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to continue to try and create a rocky surface. And so again, it's just continually working the layers, one layer on top of the other, and try to get the feeling of distance without losing the interest and without losing the fact that this is a mountain. And so you want to be able to see that as you're looking at it. And you can only see that if you give enough information to the viewer so they can tell that's what it is. So now if you look way back and you go back, look at it really small, squint your eyes. Does it still look like mountains? Does it still look like clouds and stuff? And it does. So you're starting to achieve your goal. And so we shall continue to draw. I just heard myself. So now I'm going to do the same thing that I did earlier. I'm going to go in and I'm going to soften this up again. And each time I do it, I leave a little bit more of a hint of what's there. And so you can see the size of the smudge tool I'm using. This is a 57 and it's a softer one. And so because this is on it's not on the iPad. On the iPad, when you use the Apple Pencil, how hard you press determines how much smudge you have. On this, you have to actually set the settings. So you can see how this one here is a 57 is the size of it, and it's a very custom smear. The shape is very soft, and it's not a really sharp edge to it. And so now all I'm doing is I'm trying to pull enough of this color together so that we're going to have a little bit of a mountainscape. Now this is just the background for my main image. And so we're going to add some colors to it once I have the general idea of what I wanted. I'm going to add some more color to it, and I'm going to make this not just black and grayscale. So we'll add in a little bit of green in here and a little bit of blue just to give it a different feel from the sky and try and give the sky a little bit more of a sky feel by again adding a little bit of color into it and all of this stuff. But you can see how it's starting to look a little bit more like a mountain. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just looking a lot like a whole pile of different blobs on a page. But you see how this one mountain over here, how it seems to stand out because it's darker than everything else, right? So that's kind of cool. So I'll just have to keep that in mind as I'm doing some of these. It's not too bad, but I want to make it about 300. So I want to make it bigger because it's too slow for what I'm trying to do. And so I'm just going to quickly smudge some of this stuff together because we have the general mountain idea. But now we want to pull it down and smudge it together to give you that rocky feeling. And so you can see how that now is starting to look a little bit more like mountains. I'm going to go in here and move this up. And so you can see how each time I put another layer on and I smudge it back, and I put another layer on and smudge it back, and put another layer on and smudge it back, it keeps adding more and more interesting to look at, interesting things to look at. And so you can play like this for hours and hours and hours and never ever get to the point where you're happy with it, or never get to the point where, well, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And so that's part of the whole process. And then every so often, you always want to duplicate it because it gives it a. It's kind of cool the way that it adds just more color to it. And you just combine those two objects together. This one and this one, we're going to combine together. Combine together, and then continue to add parts to the mountainside. Now you see this darker color? So I went and found that one little dark spot that was there, and I'm just going to expand it, keep pulling it, because it is interesting that how dark that was. As you see, here's another little dark spot here that I'm going to pull across, and it's very close to this one down here. So let's blend them all together. Found another dark one right in there. And so let's pull this up. Let's go back up there and find our soft one again. That's our soft one in here. And just take some of the edges off some of this stuff. So some of the best paintings I've ever done have come from this type of technique where you're just playing, pulling, playing, pulling, playing, pulling. And you can just do this for hours on end. And I find it very calming. And it's always interesting to see what you're able to achieve. And by pulling and smudging and pulling and smudging, you sort of build up a picture, which means you really can't have anything that's wrong, because you can always go back over top it. So again, you can see the way it's starting to look a little bit like mountains. But now I'm going to go really big on this again, 300, and then soften it up again. And you can see again it's added, and it's gotten a little bit more intricate. And as I blend these together, you don't want to take all the color and you don't want to take all the interest away from it, but you do want to start to Oh, looking pretty good, eh? Smudge in the clouds a little bit more. Let's try and get a little bit more cloudy effect here, maybe. Woohoo! That's too dark. Don't want that in there. So this is I'm painting. I don't want to paint. I still want to smudge. Looking at it thinking like, why is that doing that? That's way too powerful for what I was trying to achieve. And it was. So let's just try something here. Let's take this. Let's go up here to a 10. No, I'm going to need like a 40. I'm going to zoom down in here because this is on the edge of the water. So we're just going to build some trees. And because this is a little bit more in the foreground, you can spend some time creating some actual trees. And so you might want to ask, like, how the heck did I end up with all that color in there? Or all that gray? Well, damned if I know. But I think what I did is I pulled it from the side like this, and then ended up with enough of a hint that I have. Let's take this down to 20. Just pulling up some of these trees. So as I get farther away, you have a little bit of a So now if you back out, you see how now you have the mountains, and I think this area right here is going to be where my sun's going to be. You've got your mountains. I'm going to have to put some darker stuff in here to, in order to create the mountains, and you're starting to have this treescape in the foreground. And so again, this treescape is what will allow me to, as it gets closer, it'll be. Whew, that's too much. I want brush strokes. I want this one. I want it back to about 40. And I'm going to zoom back into the other side now of the water, and then I'm going to build some trees on this side. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did to the mountains earlier. Is once I have all the trees on here and that stuff, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and smooth it all down and then build another layer on top of it. And so it's just a matter of putting layers upon layers upon layers, and then I'm going to smudge it all out later on. So again, you see how I'm just quickly creating a little bit of a forest area. And what was Bob Ross used to always say? There's no such thing as a mistake. It's an opportunity to create a more interesting kind of tree. And so as these all become my trees, later on when I come in, I'll soften them out again, and then I'll come in and highlight different areas. So do you see the way this mountain over here, I have this really dark area. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with some darker colors. So like this type of color, and I'm going to put it in here. And so there might be a little bit here, and probably right in here would be a good spot for it. And right here would be a good spot for it. And so those are just areas that I know that now I can use my brush or my smudge tool and smudge some of this stuff down to create the rocky areas to fit into the mountains. And so the two extremes, you want the grayscale in between, but you also want to create little areas that are darker and will draw your eye to them. And so because this is the very edge of the mountain, and me just pulling them in the different areas, again, will help create interest in those mountains. And you can see how this still looks like the water looks like it has a mist over it already, and so does the water in the foreground. And so I'll come in and I'll enhance that idea in the different layers. So let's muck up some of this stuff here. So you see how it just sits it back. So if it's too solid dark, it will jump right off the page at you. And so all I did when I smudged it is it sits it back into the page a little bit. And so these trees, you smudge them down, sit it back down a little bit, and now take back up and take a look at it. So you still have the feeling that there's mountains there and there's some trees in the foreground. And it's kind of an interesting picture already to look at, and would make, because the background in the book doesn't have to be this really solid area. So I'm a little bit bored here, so let's go in here and just throw in a quick effect just for the hell of it. There's a lens flare. The lens flare will allow me to put something on the page that, like, wait until it loads up here. So my computer's a little fighting at the moment to try and catch up to it, but watch as it comes in. So you see how that just created a little bit of a lens flare in the middle of the clouds. And I just allow these, like, to see the reflection. It's from three-dimensional, sorry, 35 millimeter camera type lens. And so that's generated automatically by the computer. And what I'm going to do is, because it's up in the sky, I'm going to make that blue and see if that gives it a different feeling overall. So just see how the blue then just came in and kind of put some blue into the sky. And then I'm going to fill this here area in with a very light blue color. And so let's just say okay with that, just because I kind of like it. And I'll put it in later. So I'm going to take it back off again. And then I'm going to try something here. That'll be kind of interesting to see how it works. So do you see how that just took all that area in? And then I'm going to fill this in with a really light blue. Put it on the wrong one. It should be the lower one there that I was looking for. So let's go see if I can find that blue again. Let's do that. There we go. Okay, so there's some light blue there. And we're going to try and duplicate that light blue down here too. So again, this is just another method of applying the colors I wanted. And now I'm going to go in and take off the highlighted areas and smudge this stuff. Kind of interesting, don't you think? Let's just put a little bit of this kind of green right in here. Or let's go over to this area, this side a little bit more. And I'm going to smudge all of that stuff in there. Do I want some green in my hills? Sorry, I wasn't doing much talking, was I? I'm just working on generating some more interest in these hills by bringing in some of the green and some of the gray areas and whiteness for where the clouds, for where the snow is hitting on these hills, and then this could be little valleys in the foreground. So I'm coming up on almost an hour so far in the drawing. So again, this is just layering layers and layers in order to get the right feel you want in your mountains. And each layer that you put on, so let's go back out again, and you see how it's starting to come alive, and you're starting to get the feel. The mountains are looking better and better all the time. You see how this is in here? You don't like, I don't like that. And so all I would do is I'd come in here with the blue and just fix that ugliness, the stuttering. Getting hungry. Now, if you're just tuning in, this is all drawn using my mouse. And I kind of like starting an image on this, and then I move over to my iPad afterwards in order to help fill in some of the details and refine some of the stuff that I've got on here. But I like the roughness of this way of drawing because you tend not to be able to achieve the same type of feel if you it just seems a little looser and a little bit more freestyle. Um, but at the same time, it's frustrating for me sometimes because I want to do, well, I think there should be trees here. I should think there should be this here. And that's always something that you can put in afterwards as you get to that point. But until then, you're sort of like playing with it and finding things that work and things that don't work and parts of it that don't work. Like look at this part right here, which is right in the middle. Look at that nice little cloud. reflection in there. Hit somewhere up here. But we'll come back and we'll just continually work to achieve this kind of stuff and achieve that feeling. And it's not, some of it's not planned and some of it just happens. And so I'm going to go back up to that really soft one, the 57 one that I was using. Put that back to 300 or so. And then you go in 300, not 30, 300. So you see how big it is there? And then you can soften up some of these things on the edge. And remember, this is all going to be in mist. So a lot of this stuff here will just fade away as we put a little bit more mist on it. It almost looks like it's a road in the foreground. This doesn't matter because most of that will be filled in by the character that sits in the very foreground. So is there any doubt what we're looking at? We have ourselves a stream for sure. And it shows me as one person is viewing. I wonder if that's just me all the time. But we'll see. We'll just keep working at this. So what I'm doing now is just by feel, just pulling stuff. There's no rhyme or reason to a lot of it. And so I just stopped for a minute to try and get a feel as to whether I like what I've got so far. I think the mountains are good. I don't like the foreground stuff yet. And the clouds are a little missing, but I've also spent the most time on the mountains, so it's not that it's not that hard to believe that it turned out to be better than some of the other stuff. So Sorry, keep hitting my mic. Hope it's not punching the crap out of some people's eardrums. Not that difficult to build these areas up. So I need some darker colors. So let's put in some of this color. And then I'm just going to take those and move them around. But I don't like that one. So let's go to the 57 one. It's a little bit bigger. Yeah, I'll take some of the roundness off those globes of color. That will help me to pull them into the painting. And I don't want that one. I want 30 might have worked, but let's go to the 50. That's the one I want. There you go. Pulling some of this color in here, so it's a little bit more dynamic of a shore. And then go up to even less than that, go to a 10. Did I lose it? There it is. Let's see if I can pull this up into creating a bunch of trees on the shoreline. Just slowly but surely putting in a few little trees. Slowly but surely. So maybe if this picture turns out the way I want it to, it will be coming to a bookstore close to you in the near future. Or maybe not. All I can do is continually draw. So that the way it works is, as an artist, I go in, I read the book which the cover will be attached to, and then I quickly draw a drawing of some aspect of the book that stood out in my mind. Then I go back to the artist and wait for the artist then to tell me which part of that she likes, which part she doesn't, or he doesn't. And then I work on different versions of it, each one becoming a collaboration between myself and the person who wrote the book. That's always amazing what they see in the book and what I see in the book. They're normally two very different things. That doesn't mean there's a right or a wrong, it just means they're different. And so some of the imagery, which is a talent of the artist to create using words, a visual, which then I try to create the actual visual. As part of the challenge that I have as an artist, and that's to try to identify or try to take what I see in my brain based on what was written and how close I am to actually achieving that. I know for me, sometimes it's easy, and other times it's not at all. Other times I don't see it even close to the way the artist had envisioned it. And when I say the artist, I'm talking about the artist as in the person who wrote the book. And that's part of the fun and the challenge of working with commissioned work. That collaboration, trying to figure out whether or not what I see is anywhere close to what the person who actually wrote it sees. And you see how loosely some of this stuff that I'm drawing now is? It's just sort of the loose little aspects of the drawing that later on I'll come back in with an actual pencil, the Apple Pencil, and refine some of this stuff. But the idea now is to just get them an impression of what I see in my eyes in comparison to what she may see in her eye when she was writing it or he was writing it. Now I'll show you a few cool things here. So let's try this. So let's take the texture now and put that into plastic. But I want to put this into more of an icy blue type of look to it. Almost like that. And then go preview. And reset it. So you see what that does? So I want to undo the plastic. And I want to try it again. Texture. See what a relief sculpture looks like? It's just all the gray area now. And cancel that. But these are all some of the effects that come from within the. So we don't want it to be white. We'd like it to try it something else. So let's see if I can find the right blue. So that could almost be the night. So let's go with that and let's see what that looks like. So do I like that? Kind of interesting. But now I'm going to soften that whole thing. And again, this is again using the tools inside. So let's take this off, edit, undo the plastic, and we're just going to alter the color of the page for the moment. So you go on here and you pick creative, and you can go smoke glass. I'm going to reset the challenge of it. And I know we did say we wanted it to be foggy, but not that bad. So let's go up here to the blue, put it into this area here. How about that? That's kind of cool. So now we've got a little bit more of a cool feeling to it. So you see how it just cooled it off a little bit? So then I want to go in the effects here and sharpen it up again. So let's sharpen it. Go reset on it. Okay, I want it at that level. And now if you go on to effects, there's actually some weather in here. I saw somewhere, just meant, I think it's under creative. So if I go to weather, there's snow over top of it. We don't want snow. And I don't think we want rain. I think we do want fog though. But I don't really like the fog that they have. It's kind of it's kind of not the fog that I'm looking for. You see the fog down in here. I'm more happy with that than I am with anything else. But now let's put this camera flare in here and see what that looks like. Now it's doing it's taking a long time to get there, but you can see how that adds a really neat effect to that picture. It's almost like it's dusk. It's a little bit foggy, and so now it's got a kind of a neat feel to it. And with that, this in the foreground sort of makes it look really neat. So then now let's go down and put some plastic on it, but not very deep. And none of that. I want this to go right up into the white. Okay, and I want to take the depth way down, but I want to smooth everything out a lot. So that's the way I want to leave it. And then let's just zoom in and look at some of the details on it. So then what I do is I will take this into my iPad, and then I'll play with it on in the iPad a little bit. Now, the other thing that you can do with all of this stuff is then you can just go save as. You want to put it down into another page. So I'm just going to save it as like into my drop, and I'm going to say this is a background 5 or something like that. Background 8, save. It's like, okay. And then what I'll do is I take it into a few different filters now, and just play with them, play with it a little bit to help achieve the final look to it. But you can see how it all came together fairly quickly at the end there with a couple of the filters, and you very quickly have the mountain scene. And I want to thank you guys for coming by to visit. So that was about an hour and a half, and I hope you learned something. That this was not drawing on an apple. This was not using this Autodesk sketchbook. This was drawing on my computer using my mouse and using a program called Corel Photo Paint. I hope you enjoyed.